She's been gone for 3 weeks, my daughter-in-law Margot said. Her voice was smooth as honey. Poisoned honey. I stood in my kitchen, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and felt the floor shift beneath me. My son Trevor stood beside her, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet mine. The doctors called us, said she'd escaped the facility in the middle of the night. I set my coffee mug down on the counter. My fingers stayed on the ceramic for a moment longer than necessary. That's not possible. Mom, Trevor started, but Margot cut him off with a hand on his arm. She smiled at me, that smile I'd never quite trusted, the one that didn't reach her eyes. We've been trying to protect you, trying to keep it quiet. But people are starting to talk. Your friends are calling. Everyone wants to know where you've been. The mug felt suddenly cold against my palm. I pulled my hand away slowly. I've been right here. I've been here the entire time. Margot tilted her head. She was beautiful in that calculated way. Blonde hair perfectly styled, designer clothes, manicured nails. Everything about her was controlled. Jaduna, sweetheart, you're not making sense. You're confused. That's the medication talking, isn't it? My name on her lips felt like an accusation. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been normal. Or what I thought was normal. I'd been working my job as a hospital administrator, managing the day-to-day operations of Riverside Medical Center. 62 years old, divorced twice, with 2 adult children who'd grown into people I barely recognized. Trevor was 41, a financial advisor with expensive tastes and a wife who'd married him for his potential and stayed for his income. My daughter Sylvia was 38, living in Seattle, calling every other month, her own life too full to include much of her mother. But that afternoon, standing in my kitchen while Margot's lie hung in the air between us, I realized I didn't know my son at all. I think you should sit down, Margot said, moving toward me with practiced concern. You're getting worked up. That's not good for you. We talked to your doctor about this. He said stress can trigger episodes. I don't have a doctor, I said. I'm not sick. I've never been sick. Trevor finally looked at me. His eyes were the same green as mine, but they held something I'd never seen before. Pity. Or was it fear? Mom, we found the discharge papers. From Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital. Your name is on them. The dates. I've never been to Westbrook, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Smaller. I've never been to any psychiatric hospital. I've never needed to be. Margot sat down at my kitchen table, crossing her legs with the ease of someone completely comfortable in their deception. Your boss called me yesterday. She said you haven't been to work in 3 weeks. She's worried about you. She said you've been unstable lately. That you've been making mistakes. She was very concerned about your mental state. My hands found the counter edge. I held on. My boss didn't call you. My boss doesn't know you. And I've been to work every single day. But even as I said it, doubt crept in like a shadow. Had I been to work? I tried to remember the past 3 weeks. The memories were there. I could see the hospital corridors, feel the weight of my responsibilities, hear the familiar voices of my colleagues. But they felt distant somehow, like I was remembering a dream I'd had rather than a life I'd lived. We have the hospital records, Trevor said quietly. He pulled out his phone. His hands moved with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. Look, your admission date, your discharge date, the diagnosis. I didn't look at the phone. I couldn't, because I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was on that screen would be a perfect forgery. Someone had created documents with my name, my social security number, my medical history. Someone had done this deliberately, carefully, completely. Who? I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. Who what? Margot asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Who did this? Who created these documents? Who called my boss? Margot and Trevor exchanged a look. It was quick, barely perceptible, but I saw it. A moment of communication that excluded me. That decided something about me. Jediuna, Margot said, standing up and walking toward me. You're having a crisis. We need to get you help. I've already called Dr. Whitmore. He can see you this evening. He's very experienced with... No. I stepped back. My hip hit the counter. No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling... Your lawyer already knows, Trevor said. His voice was steady, practiced. We had to inform him of your situation. He recommended that you get psychiatric evaluation before we proceed with any legal matters. I stared at my son. This man I'd raised. This man I'd paid for college, helped with his first apartment, celebrated with when he got engaged. This man who was now sitting in my kitchen, calmly explaining how my entire life had been dismantled. Why? I asked. Trevor didn't answer immediately. He looked away, toward the window where the afternoon light was beginning to fade. Because you were going to ruin everything, he finally said. The words hung there, stark, honest in their cruelty. What are you talking about? Margot moved to stand beside Trevor, her hand finding his shoulder. A gesture of solidarity, of partnership, of conspiracy. Your son has worked very hard to build his financial advisory business. He has important clients, important relationships, and you are becoming a liability. A liability? I repeated. The words felt foreign in my mouth. You kept asking questions, Trevor said. Now he looked at me, and his eyes were hard. Cold. About my business. About where money was going. About why I was spending so much time with certain clients. You were going to talk to someone. You were going to cause problems. Understanding crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't random. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was planned, executed, orchestrated. You stole from your clients, I said. It wasn't a question. Trevor's jaw tightened. I made investments that didn't pan out, but I was going to fix it. I was going to make it right. But you were going to go to the authorities. You were going to destroy everything I've built. So you destroyed me instead, I said. Margot smiled that poisoned smile. We prefer to think of it as protecting the family, protecting Trevor's reputation, his career, his future. You understand, don't you? A mother wants the best for her son. I understood perfectly, and the understanding made me feel sick. That night, I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind kept replaying the afternoon, searching for the moment when my son had decided I was expendable. Searching for the exact point when his wife had convinced him that destroying his mother was acceptable. I thought about calling someone, the police, my lawyer, my friends. But I knew what would happen. I would tell them my story, and they would look at me with the same expression Trevor and Margot had worn. Pity mixed with doubt, because the documents would be perfect. The hospital records would be official. The diagnosis would be clinical and thorough. And my son worked in finance. He had money. He had connections. He had the ability to make things disappear or to make them appear. Around midnight, I got out of bed and went to my computer. I logged into my email. My inbox was full of messages from colleagues asking where I was, asking if I was okay, asking if I needed anything, but there was nothing from my boss, nothing official, I called the hospital. The main line went to a recording. I called back and pressed 0 for the operator. It took me 15 minutes to reach someone who could help me. I need to verify that I'm employed there, I said. I need to confirm my employment status. The operator put me on hold. When she came back, her voice was cautious. Ms. Franklin, are you calling about your leave of absence? My stomach dropped. What leave of absence? The medical leave you requested 3 weeks ago. Your paperwork is all in order. You're approved for up to 8 weeks. Your benefits are continuing. Is there a problem? I didn't request a leave of absence, I said. Someone else did. Someone forged my signature. There was a long pause. Ms. Franklin, I'm going to connect you with HR. They can help clarify this. But I hung up before they could transfer me, because I knew what would happen next. Someone in HR would pull up a file with my signature on it. A signature that would look exactly like mine because someone had taken the time to forge it perfectly. There would be a doctor's note. There would be documentation. There would be a paper trail that proved I was exactly where Trevor and Margot said I was. They had been thorough. They had thought of everything. I sat at my computer for hours searching for records of Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital, searching for my name in their system, searching for any evidence that would prove I'd never been there. And I found nothing. Because, of course, I found nothing. They wouldn't be stupid enough to leave evidence. They would have used a hospital that was real, but where I could never actually verify my records. They would have used a doctor who was real, but who would never remember seeing me. They would have created a perfect fiction. By dawn, I understood the genius of their plan. They hadn't just created false documents. They had created a false reality. One that was so well constructed, so thoroughly documented, that no one would believe me when I said it wasn't true. Not my friends, not my boss, not the police. The only person who could prove I was lying was me. And I was the only person no one would believe. I went to work the next day. I showered, dressed, and drove to Riverside Medical Center like nothing had happened. Like my son and his wife hadn't spent the previous afternoon systematically destroying my credibility. Like my entire life hadn't been rewritten while I slept. My boss was in her office. I could see her through the glass walls. She was on the phone, her expression concerned. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call and stood up. Jaduna, she said, coming around her desk. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you. I'm fine, I said. I'm back. I'm ready to work. She exchanged a look with her assistant, who was hovering in the doorway. The same look Trevor and Margot had exchanged. The look that said she thought I was unstable. Why don't we sit down? My boss said gently. I think we should talk about your leave of absence. I didn't take a leave of absence, I said. My voice was steady, calm. Someone forged my signature. Someone created false medical documents. I've been here the entire time. I've been going about my life normally. My boss sat back down. She gestured for me to do the same. Jaduna, I have your paperwork right here. Your signature is on the request. The hospital sent over your discharge summary. The diagnosis is very clear. Show me, I said. She pulled up a file on her computer and turned the monitor toward me. There was my signature. Perfect. Exactly like my real signature. And below it, a doctor's letterhead from Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital. A diagnosis of acute paranoid delusions. A recommendation for ongoing psychiatric care. I stared at the screen. My hands stayed perfectly still. I didn't let anything show on my face. This isn't real, I said. This is a forgery. My son did this. His wife helped him. They created these documents to discredit me. My boss looked away. That was when I knew I'd lost her. That was when I understood that no amount of evidence would ever convince her. Because the evidence was already there, right in front of us, official and documented and perfect. I think you should go home, she said quietly. I think you should see a doctor, a real doctor, someone who can help you. I don't need help, I said. I need you to believe me. I do believe you, she said, and I think she meant it. I think she believed that I believed what I was saying. I believe that you're going through something very difficult. I believe that you need support. But I can't have you working here if you're experiencing delusions. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to our patients. I left the hospital without another word. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for an hour, staring at my house. My beautiful house that I'd bought with my own money, that I'd renovated with my own hands, that I'd filled with my own memories. And it felt like a stage set, like a prop in a play where I was the only person who didn't know the script. The calls started coming that afternoon. First, it was my sister, calling from Ohio. Jaduna, honey, I heard you've been in the hospital. Why didn't you tell me? Why did I have to hear it from Trevor? Then it was my college roommate. I ran into Margot at the grocery store. She told me you're having some mental health issues. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? Then it was my neighbor. I just wanted to check on you. I heard you'd been in a psychiatric facility. That must have been scary. If you need anything, please let me know. Each call was a knife. Each call was someone else accepting the story. Each call was someone else deciding that I was unstable, unreliable, not to be trusted. I didn't answer any of them. I let them go to voicemail and listened to the concerned voices, the careful words, the pity that dripped through the phone line. By evening, I realized the full scope of what had been done. Trevor and Margot hadn't just created false documents. They had created a narrative. They had told people, carefully selected people, that I'd been in a psychiatric hospital. They had made sure that the story would spread, that it would reach my friends, my colleagues, my family. They had turned me into a cautionary tale, a woman who'd had a breakdown, a woman who couldn't be trusted, a woman whose perceptions couldn't be relied upon. They had made me invisible. I sat on my couch and tried to think of what to do. I could go to the police, but what would I tell them? That my son had forged documents? I had no proof. The documents looked authentic. They had hospital letterhead. They had a doctor's signature. They had all the official markers of legitimacy. I could hire a lawyer. But what would I sue for? Defamation? I'd have to prove that the statements were false. And to prove they were false, I'd have to prove that I'd never been to Westbrook. And to prove that, I'd have to... What? Get the hospital to confirm I was never there? But they would never confirm that. They would protect their records. They would hide behind privacy laws. And even if they didn't, it would take months, years, maybe. And in that time, the story would have already spread. The damage would already be done. I could confront Trevor directly. Demand that he tell the truth. But why would he? What incentive did he have? I was already discredited. I was already unstable. Anything I said would be seen as a symptom of my condition, not evidence of his crime. They had thought of everything. They had created a trap that was absolutely airtight. I sat on my couch in the darkness and understood what it meant to be completely, utterly alone. Not because I was isolated, but because everyone I knew had decided I was unreliable. Everyone I knew had decided that my version of reality couldn't be trusted. The next morning, I made a decision. If I couldn't fight the lie, I would document the truth. I would create my own record. I would gather evidence that would prove, beyond any doubt, that I had never been to Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital, that I had been at work, that I had been living my normal life, that I was sane. I started with my credit card statements. I pulled up every transaction from the past month, every coffee I'd bought, every grocery store visit, every gas purchase. Each one was a timestamp. Each one proved I was in the city, going about my life, not locked in a psychiatric facility. I pulled up my work emails. I had sent dozens of them over the past 3 weeks. Emails about staffing decisions, emails about budget allocations, emails about patient care protocols. Each one was dated. Each one proved I had been working. I pulled up my calendar. I had appointments, doctor's visits, lunch with friends. Each one was documented. I gathered it all and put it in a folder, a physical folder with printed documents, evidence that my life had continued uninterrupted. Then I called my lawyer. His name was Richard Ashford, and I'd used him for my divorce proceedings 5 years earlier. He was a good lawyer, thorough, careful, expensive. When I explained the situation to him, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You're saying your son and his wife created false psychiatric records to discredit you?" he finally asked. "Yes," I said. "I have evidence that I was never at Westbrook. I was at work. I was at home. I was living my life." "And what is your evidence?" I told him about the credit card statements, the work emails, the calendar appointments. I could hear him typing, taking notes. "That's circumstantial," he said finally. "It proves you were in the city. But it doesn't prove you weren't at the hospital as well. These documents could be falsified, but proving that would require expert testimony. It would require subpoenaing the hospital's records. It would be expensive. It would take time." "How much time?" I asked. "Months, possibly a year or more. And Jaruna, I have to be honest with you. Even if we can prove the documents are false, even if we can prove you were never at the hospital, the damage to your reputation has already been done. People believe the story now. They believe your son." "So what do I do?" I asked. "I just accept it? I just let them destroy me?" "No," Richard said. "But I need to understand something first. Why would they do this? What's the motivation? People don't just forge psychiatric records for no reason." So I told him about the financial crimes, about Trevor's clients, about the missing money, about how I'd been asking questions and threatening to go to the authorities. Richard was quiet for a long moment. "Do you have proof of this? Evidence of the financial crimes?" "No," I admitted. "I was just suspicious. I didn't have concrete proof. That's why I was going to talk to someone." "Okay," Richard said. "So they preempted you. They made you look unstable before you could make accusations. It's actually quite clever. If you go to the authorities now and accuse your son of financial crimes, they can point to your psychiatric hospitalization and say you're experiencing delusions. They've built a perfect defense." I felt sick. "So they've won. They've actually won." "Not necessarily," Richard said. "But we need to be very careful about how we proceed. We need to build an airtight case. We need to do this methodically and thoroughly. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Bring all your documentation." I agreed to meet with him the next day. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my house, trying to breathe normally, trying not to panic. Because Richard was right. They had won. They had created a situation where I couldn't accuse them of anything without being seen as unstable. They had turned my own credibility against me. But I wasn't going to accept it. I wasn't going to let them destroy me without a fight. I spent that night gathering more evidence. I went through my phone records. I called the hospital where I worked and asked them to print out my time card records for the past month. The HR department was hesitant. They said they couldn't release that information without going through proper channels, but I was persuasive. I told them I was trying to verify my work history for legal reasons. I told them it was important. Eventually, they agreed to email me the records. I went through my house and gathered every receipt, every document, every piece of paper that proved I was where I said I was. I organized it all chronologically. I created a timeline that showed exactly where I was and what I was doing every single day for the past month. I also did something else. I called Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital directly. "I'm trying to verify some information about a patient," I said to the woman who answered. "I believe a family member of mine was admitted to your facility recently. Can you confirm that?" "I'm sorry," the woman said. "We can't release patient information over the phone. HIPAA regulations." "I understand," I said, "but I'm the patient. I'm calling to verify my own records." "Okay," the woman said. "What's your name?" "Jaduna Franklin," I said. "I believe I was admitted 3 weeks ago." There was a pause. I heard typing. Then the woman came back on the line. "I'm not finding a record under that name. Are you sure you were admitted to our facility?" My heart started racing. "Yes, I'm sure. Can you check again?" "I'm checking our system," the woman said. "I'm not seeing any record of a Jaduna Franklin being admitted in the past 6 months. Are you sure it was Westbrook? There are several psychiatric facilities in the area." "I'm sure it was Westbrook," I said. "Can you check the past 6 months more carefully?" "I'm looking at our system right now," the woman said. "There's no record. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you." I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking. I had just confirmed what I already knew, that I'd never been to Westbrook. But now I had a witness. Now I had someone who could testify that there was no record of me ever being admitted. I called Richard back immediately. "I just called the hospital," I said. "They have no record of me ever being admitted." I spoke to a woman in admissions. She confirmed it. "That's good," Richard said. "But we need to be careful. We need to get that in writing. We need an official statement from the hospital. We need to subpoena their records to prove that they have no documentation of you." "Can we do that?" I asked. "Yes," Richard said. "But it requires going through the legal system. It requires filing a lawsuit. It requires making this public." I understood what he wasn't saying. Making this public would mean admitting that I'd been accused of being mentally ill. It would mean opening myself up to scrutiny. It would mean giving Trevor and Margot a platform to defend themselves, to explain their side of the story. But it was also the only way to prove the truth. "Do it," I said. "File the lawsuit. I don't care anymore if it's public. I need people to know what they did." Richard filed the lawsuit 2 weeks later. Jaduna Franklin versus Trevor Franklin and Margot Franklin. The charges were defamation, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit alleged that my son and his wife had deliberately created false psychiatric records and spread false information about my mental health in order to discredit me and prevent me from reporting financial crimes. The moment the lawsuit was filed, everything changed. Suddenly, people who'd been avoiding me started calling back. Suddenly, my boss wanted to meet with me. Suddenly, my friends started reaching out with apologies and explanations for why they'd believed the story. But the most important thing that happened was that Trevor and Margot had to respond. They had to file a countersuit. They had to defend themselves, and in defending themselves, they had to explain why they'd done it. Their lawyer, a slick man named Gregory Hensworth, who specialized in family law, filed a response that was carefully crafted. He didn't deny creating the false documents. Instead, he claimed that I had been experiencing mental health issues and that they had been trying to help me. He claimed that I had been paranoid and delusional. He claimed that I had been threatening to make false accusations against Trevor. He claimed that they had acted out of concern for my well-being and Trevor's reputation. It was a brilliant defense. It turned my accusation into a symptom of my illness. It made them look like concerned family members trying to help a struggling relative. But it had one fatal flaw. It required them to prove that I was actually mentally ill. It required them to produce evidence of my instability. It required them to demonstrate that I was experiencing delusions, and they couldn't do that because I wasn't mentally ill. And they knew it. The deposition started 3 months later. I sat across from Gregory Hensworth in a conference room at Richard's office. There was a court reporter taking notes. Everything was being recorded. Everything was official. "Ms. Franklin," Gregory said, his voice smooth and reasonable. "You've alleged that your son and his wife created false psychiatric records. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. "They forged documents to make it look like I'd been admitted to Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital." "And what is your evidence of this?" Gregory asked. "I laid out everything. The credit card statements, the work emails, the calendar appointments, the time card records from the hospital, the phone call to Westbrook confirming they had no record of me. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin." "So you have documentation that you were in the city," Gregory said. "But that doesn't prove you weren't at the hospital as well." "I called the hospital," I said. "They confirmed they have no record of me ever being admitted. That's proof." "One person's word against hospital records," Gregory said. "And we have hospital records that show you were admitted." "Those records are forged," I said. "That's the entire point of this lawsuit." Gregory smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Franklin, do you have any evidence that these records are forged? Any expert testimony? Any documentation proving that the hospital records are false?" I didn't answer immediately. Because he was right. I didn't have that yet. But Richard had hired a forensic document examiner, someone who specialized in detecting forged signatures and false documents. The examination was underway. "We're in the process of obtaining expert testimony," I said. "We have a forensic document examiner analyzing the hospital records. And until that expert testimony is complete, we only have your word against the official records of a psychiatric hospital," Gregory said. "Is that correct?" "The records are fake," I said, my voice steady. "My son created them." "Do you have any evidence that your son has the technical knowledge to forge hospital records?" Gregory asked. "Do you have any evidence that he has access to hospital letterhead or official seals? Do you have any evidence that he has ever forged documents before?" I didn't have that evidence, but I knew with absolute certainty that Trevor had done this. I could feel it. I could sense it. But feeling something and proving something are two very different things. The forensic analysis took 6 weeks. When the results came back, they were conclusive. The hospital records had been forged. The signature on the admission form didn't match any known exemplar of my signature. The letterhead was a high-quality reproduction, but contained subtle errors that indicated it was a copy of a copy. The doctor's signature was identical on every document, a sign that it had been scanned and pasted rather than signed individually. The forged documents were so obvious once you knew what to look for that I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it immediately. But that was the point. That was the genius of the crime. The documents were just authentic enough to fool people who weren't looking for fraud. They were just official enough to be believed by people who had no reason to doubt them. With the forensic evidence in hand, Richard filed a motion to dismiss Trevor and Margot's countersuit. He also filed a motion for sanctions against their lawyer for filing false claims. Gregory Hensworth's response was immediate and vicious. He filed a counter-motion claiming that the forensic analysis was flawed. He hired his own expert, who claimed that the documents were authentic. He filed a motion to suppress the forensic evidence. The case was heading to trial. But before the trial could begin, something unexpected happened. I received a call from Trevor. His voice was different, smaller, defeated. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." I almost hung up. I almost didn't want to hear whatever excuse he was about to make, but I answered, "I'm listening." "Margot is gone," he said. "She left me. She took half of everything and left. She said she wasn't going to go to trial. She said she wasn't going to spend the money on lawyers. She said I was on my own." I didn't say anything. I waited for him to continue. "I can't do this alone," Trevor said. His voice was cracking. "I can't afford the lawyers. I can't afford the expert witnesses. And I know that I can't win. I know that the documents are fake. I know that you're going to prove it in court. I know that everyone is going to know what I did." "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Why did you try to destroy your own mother?" "Because I was scared," Trevor said. "Because I knew what I'd done. I knew I'd stolen from my clients. I knew that if you went to the authorities, I would go to prison. I would lose everything. My career, my reputation, my freedom. And I panicked. I let Margot convince me that if we could make you look unstable, if we could discredit you before you could make accusations, we could get away with it." "And now?" I asked. "Now I'm going to confess," Trevor said. "I'm going to tell the authorities about the money I stole. I'm going to tell them about the false documents. I'm going to plead guilty. I'm going to accept the consequences." I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something. The beginning of understanding, maybe. The beginning of closure. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you're my mother," Trevor said. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for trying to destroy you. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for all of it." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had closed. "I'm going to withdraw the countersuit," Trevor continued. "I'm going to tell my lawyer to stop fighting, and I'm going to turn myself in to the authorities. I'm going to confess to everything. The fraud, the false documents, all of it. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that you were telling the truth." He hung up before I could say anything else. The next day, Trevor's lawyer filed a motion to withdraw the countersuit. The day after that, Trevor walked into the FBI office and confessed to everything. He confessed to the fraud. He confessed to the forged documents. He confessed to the conspiracy with Margot. The story that followed was everywhere. Local news, national news. My son, the financial advisor, had stolen from his clients and then tried to frame his mother as mentally ill to cover it up. It was the kind of story that people couldn't stop talking about. My vindication was complete, but it came at a cost. Trevor spent 18 months in federal prison. During that time, I didn't visit him. I didn't write him letters. I didn't respond to his attempts to contact me. I needed distance. I needed time. I needed to process what he'd done and what it meant that my own son had tried to destroy me. Margot disappeared. She moved to California with her share of the assets and started a new life. I never heard from her again, and I didn't want to. My job at Riverside Medical Center was offered back to me, but I declined. I couldn't go back there. Too many people knew what had happened. Too many people had believed the lie. I couldn't face them every day, knowing that they'd doubted me, knowing that they'd accepted the false narrative. Instead, I took a position at a different hospital in a different city. I moved away from the place where my son had tried to destroy me. I moved away from the friends who'd believed the lie. I moved away from the life I'd built, because that life had become a minefield of betrayal and doubt. For the first year, I was angry, furious. I replayed the afternoon in my kitchen over and over again, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Some way I could have seen it coming. Some way I could have prevented it. But slowly, the anger faded. It was replaced by something else: understanding, sadness, a kind of resigned acceptance that the people we love are capable of terrible things. I started therapy. I started processing what had happened. I started understanding that Trevor's actions said nothing about me. They said everything about him, about his fear, about his desperation, about his willingness to sacrifice his own mother to protect himself. And I started to rebuild. Today, 5 years later, I'm sitting in my new house in a new city. I have a new job at a new hospital. I have new friends. I have a life that doesn't include my son. Trevor was released from prison 3 years ago. He tried to contact me. He sent letters. He tried to call. He wanted reconciliation. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted his mother back. I never responded. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. Some betrayals are too profound to overcome. But I've forgiven him. Not for his sake, for mine. I've forgiven him so that I can move forward, so that I can sleep without anger burning in my chest, so that I can live without the weight of what he did crushing me every day. I've also learned something important. I've learned that the truth, no matter how buried, has a way of emerging. I've learned that lies, no matter how well constructed, eventually crumble. I've learned that the most important thing in life is not whether people believe you in the moment, but whether you believe in yourself. I believed in myself, even when everyone else doubted me, even when the evidence seemed stacked against me, even when I was completely, utterly alone. I believed that I was sane. I believed that I was telling the truth. I believed that eventually justice would prevail. And it did. If you're facing a situation where people don't believe you, where your credibility has been attacked, where you're being gaslit by people you trusted, don't give up. Document everything. Gather evidence. Find people who will support you. Believe in yourself, because the truth matters, and eventually it will set you free.